Welcome to VCs Off the Record. This is Real Talk with Real Investors. Your host, Gayle Jennings-O'Byrne, CEO of Wocstar Capital and co-founder of the Wocstar Fund, has spent 30 years in finance. And I'm here too. I'm Victoria Bird. I'm the Chief Content Officer and Creative Director of Wocstar Media. And I've spent 30 years in media. We champion female entrepreneurs. We champion diverse teams, and we're both passionate about stories that change old narratives. We're looking to inform you, inspire you, and help you get your bag and your dreams.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of VC Off the Record. I'm here with Victoria, our amazing Chief Content Officer and Creative Director for Wocstar Media. And I'm your host, Gayle Jennings-O'Byrne, the CEO of Wocstar Capital and the co-founder of Wocstar Fund. And in that vein of fund and investing, I want to take it in a different direction. And so you guys are going to meet Josh Tanenbaum, who is a VC. He is an investor. He is actually an amazing member of the Venture Access Alliance, an initiative of New York City's Economic Development Corp. But I wanted to take it in a different direction because he is an investor with heart. And he's an investor who comes at this with an impactful mind. And that started from his family. And I can't wait for you to hear the story of he and his family and how it shows up today in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I saw him, met him before you sat down with him. And he's very curious. He's questioning. When you look at his website and it talks about their very intentional, impactful investing. And I just thought that was such an interesting concept, right? And tell people what that means when someone says that's their model.
Well, I get called an impact investor all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because I'm Black and I'm a woman. And I'm not an impact investor. I mean, I can't help not be impactful because that's just how we
right.
show up.
It doesn't mean I just make an impact, right?
Exactly.
Right.
But what I love is where it's evolving to, which is the ability to be a smart, market-based, returns-driven investor, but who also thinks about the impact that their investing can do, whether it be who we invest in, the technologies that they're developing and how they impact the world, the communities for which those innovations and products and services will be serving and impacting. It's just that other lens by which we could and should be investing.
Yeah, and giving out big checks.
Without being forgoing returns,
right.
Without forgoing job creation, without leaving behind winning, which I always talk about.
Right, and he's giving out big money, right? This is not
huge money.
Very. We're
not going to tell you until you listen.
Yeah,
to this.
no. You'll want to know that number.
It's a big number.
You want to know that number. All right, we're gonna keep the top short so we can talk about it afterwards. Right? We'll go to a little break, and then you're gonna talk to Josh.
Talk to you and see you all soon.
This episode of VCs Off the Record is brought to you by Wocstar Ghetto Film School Entrepreneurial Academy.
Hey, Wockstars, welcome back to VCs Off the Record. We told you all about him, but he is here live in the studio, Josh Tanenbaum with Rebalance Capital. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Yeah, I mean, we have another episode where we talk about people on your list that you want to meet and know and, kiki with. And you're one of those people on my list. So thank you for being here.
That is very kind.
Yeah, and true. It's true. We have a lot we're going to talk about, and I should start with your origin story because it is in itself a whole podcast. It truly is. I mean, you're amazing. You're amazing too, but your origin story, your family story is amazing as well. So I want to start there. I want to get into Rebalance itself. I want to get into your journey after hearing about your family. And I want to thank you for being a Venture Access Alliance member. We're going to talk about that too. So, not one, but two iconic civil activists. How does that happen and what does that look like?
Great question. I can give you probably half of that story because one I didn't get to meet, unfortunately. But my father and my mother have two very separate but very exciting careers and personal stories. My father, who's originally from Baltimore, family is Ukrainian by background, came to Light Street, had a store, very traditional American story. My father, hilariously, actually was going to go to med school and dropped out after a day.
A day?
Yeah, and ultimately...
He couldn't figure that out the day before the day?
That's a great question.
All right, we'll have another podcast.
But he actually was a journalist at heart and was a writer. And so had spent a great deal of time with these very basic, important skills that ultimately would be fundamental being a civil rights activist, believe it or not. But after that, he became a rabbi, an ordained rabbi, where he learned from Abraham Joshua Heschel, who is one of the great rabbinical civil rights activists.
Yeah. And scholar, I mean.
Indeed.
His teachings are...
His whole, I actually went to the Heschel School growing up. There was very little choice. It's like, this is the person that taught your father. That's the domain that's going to teach you. So we studied our fair share of Heschel, who's a brilliant philosopher. But really, my father's claim to fame, largely when he worked for the American Jewish Committee, was working with Martin Luther King to help support the civil rights movement, and particularly galvanizing religious communities for the cause, because he was just so talented at getting communities to speak to each other that had historically been fractured. Yeah. And one of his big contributions was during Vatican Council II with Pope John II, where he really advised on the construction of a document called Nostra Aetate, which said, under the same ray of light, we can bring together Jews, Catholics, and less spoken about, but Muslims as well, together over perhaps poorly worded spilled milk. Yeah. And so really, outside of those two monumental events, he was a consultant, advisor to successive presidents on how do you bridge divides across largely religious, but generally communities. Yeah. Exactly. So that's his story. He passed away at the age of 66, about 7 weeks before I was born. And I'll tell my mother's story, but I had a choice as to whether that would be a legacy I honor or it was a burden. And I think there's a chapter where I felt it was a burden, but in the beginning, my intention was to learn as much about him as possible. And my mother started an organization that continued his work called the Tanenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding. And my first internship was licking envelopes and going through and building an archive and building a Wikipedia page, which of course they completely redid because my version was garbage. But that was the most powerful learning experience I had about my father's history. My mother, and if that's not sufficiently interesting, we call the rock star of the family. My mother was born in 1946 in Budapest, so right in the aftermath of World War II.
Yeah, I was going to say, literally
in the throes. And via France, she ultimately came to the United States at the age of 6. She grew up in Queens, in Kew Gardens, which was a heavily immigrant concentrated community.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And she went to public school all throughout her young years, but she ultimately was a Vassar graduate in the last all-women's class. And she was a sociology graduate that became a criminologist. And so her first, outside of also being a voracious reader and writer and having written significant books in the world of criminology, one called Crime Warps, she was known as a reformer, a change agent with the New York Police Department. And amongst other...
Incredible.
Oh, yeah. I will never try to compete with my mother. But what she did constructively was basically build the community policing manual. And a portion of her work was focused on how women were treated in street policing. And moreover, if you like Law & Order SVU, she's the inspiration for the sex crimes unit. So
Get out.
yeah, I see all in the back of
The whole
podcast there.
production
Everyone's
team and
freaking-
my team are like, I was trying not to do the sound effect. But yeah, I mean, I've watched it every episode since it's been on, since its inception.
So same, and I hadn't realized that there was like a story behind this when I was a child, but this was like the go-to thing my mother and I would watch together. It's like a little dark for, I don't know, 5-year-old, 10-year-old. Nonetheless, an incredible story, but that's really just the beginning for her. There's really multiple chapters here where
Because she's had other careers and chapters to her life too.
Indeed. So she was a broadcast journalist. She would basically report on street crimes and other things. This criminology background actually was the inroads.
This
And
connective tissue.
Indeed. And then ultimately she became, she got a banking degree at UD, University of Delaware, and she became the chief marketing officer of Women's First Bank.
I remember it.
You do. I don't, I'm afraid. But what I do know
I didn't have an account there.
but what we do know
all
is
things
that,
women finance,
Well, indeed, but men ultimately ruined that bank. So as
I
life
was
goes.
I was not gonna say it. I'm glad that you said it, and
I will take that.
They
license.
bought it, and then
So I think thanks to my mother as well, I'm an unapologetic feminist, and that comes somewhat in the form of capitalism too. So I guess that's the appropriate call out.
I love it.
But
I joined the club that she was in, which is Forbes 50 over 50 list.
Indeed.
So I am in a club that she was a member before me.
Before you, but age-wise, you're before her because she didn't get it until she was in her mid to late 70s.
Okay. I got it right before my 55th birthday.
Hey,
yes.
That's a birthday gift.
It really is, because there's so many ebb and flow moments of am I doing the right thing? Am I, you suffer a little imposter syndrome, and they're doing it better than we're doing it, and they're bigger. And it was just this moment of you know what, Gayle, you're doing something good, and someone sees it. So keep going.
Well, not a lot of people see it. So kudos.
You're kind.
But her welcome to that community, there's kind of two elements of her life's work today. So one, when my father passed, she dedicated herself and raised me in one hand while starting the Tanenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding. And organizationally, they recognized how religion in general has been used for destructive purposes, but the reality is it should be used for constructive and positive purposes. It plays such an important role and a moral center for human beings. And they said, let's look at how today's time where religion intersects, and it is in healthcare, it's in education, the workplace. And they actually formed over time a network of individuals called Peacemakers in Action. And these are individuals who were religiously motivated individuals that reached across party lines, and in essence were key contributors to the ending of major wars. But I would say the Forbes 50 under 50 or 50 over 50, excuse me, yes, indeed, 50 over 50, and also the AARP prize was because she's helped catalyze over $500 million of aid for displaced refugees in war-torn countries. And that work continues today.
Incredible. And all of what you've spoken about is so relevant for the times we're living in now.
It's almost like it's on repeat, right?
Yeah.
Both economically and also culturally.
Yeah, I think that's right. Are you able to step back and articulate how you think it's shaped you as a person and the work that you do? Can you see that?
Yes. I think it's influential in terms of a moral code and a value set. It's influential in terms of my chosen paths, what's like them and what's distinct from them. And I think much of my worldview is in essence inspired by both my upbringing and their legacies. I'll say specifically, so one, I was raised obviously as the son of a rabbi in a Jewish home, and the notion of tikkun olam, repairing the world, is at the epicenter of every major life decision we make. The way we treat people, the expectation to give without receiving back, and the way in which we help people, like the rules by which you help, which sounds like a silly concept, but the best way to help someone is to help someone help themselves without them knowing that you helped.
Yeah.
Because people get to keep their honor that way.
Yeah, I was going to say there's real dignity. There's restorative dignity in that.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And so that's a key influencing factor, I think, in the work we do today at Rebalance Capital, for sure. Second was being in diverse settings. So perhaps funny, but I spent a great deal of time visiting churches. I think I'm one of the few Jewish children that have been blessed by Cardinal O'Connor. And I spent time going.
I'm Catholic and I haven't been blessed by him.
Well, indeed. Sadly, he passed. Another great human rights.
I mean, I don't think I'm going to go to hell, but I haven't been blessed by him.
Well, it's okay. There are lots of other blessings out there. And I also went to like Baptist churches, and not always in the most popular neighborhoods. New York City is a melting pot of diversity, not just culturally, but also in the negative sense of, there's both big wealth inequities.
And
and
they say like one of the most segregated hours is church hour.
Indeed.
Right.
So well said. Yeah, I'm not sure I thought about it in those terms, but I think that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
But the point is to say, like, if you start to think about each other's experience, and specifically how we relate to each other, and recognizing, for example, we agree on like 90%, and it's the 10% that really tears us apart. So you want to go home, you want a full fridge, you want, I'm sure your lovely Irish husband, for you two to be happily ever married together. You want your neighbors to not like bang on your doors at obnoxious hours. Like, just whatever your background is, we all tend to want 90% of the same things.
Yeah.
And if we can start with what we agree on versus the 10% that we viciously disagree on, we can actually focus on coexisting. Coexisting shouldn't be where the end point is, but that's the starting place.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you said that, because there was so much talk earlier in the year about, can we get to a place of unifying America? And do we have, candidates and politicians that can help lead that? And I feel like we use things like religion and our zip codes and economic wants and agendas to keep us at bay, when really we should start with, those commonalities, those shared beliefs and values that we have. I always loved talking to you, and I didn't realize maybe part of it is because we both have this, there's a genuine love, curiosity about world religions and other people and other cultures. Because when you come into a room, you come into it with dignity and respect for others that have different experiences than you. And I didn't realize that maybe that's part of how and why we connect so well.
You also ask great questions, by the way.
I'm just fascinated by people.
But that skill is a mobilizer, right? If you think about, if you put your own personal experience aside for a second and you look at the rest of the world and you pick different corners of it, and you find individuals that look and think nothing like you, and you start by asking questions versus giving answers, then you get buy-in through questions, right?
Yeah.
You get buy-in through, you have an interest in what I have to say, right? Like your ability to do that in multiple settings I think is what galvanizes people to, arrive at the
Wocstar.
objective.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you. I have a rabbi in my life who's about building bridges amongst communities. And I think he's been a big influence on how that shapes up in me. Okay, I don't want people leaving here thinking that you and I only have deep conversations. I do want us to talk finance and investing. But I want to start because what's really cool about you is not only the work that you're doing as an investor, as a venture capitalist now, but your path actually started as an entrepreneur, which is not the same journey for a lot of venture capitalists. And help me understand, because it sounded like some cool shit, like artist scouting. I was like, is he just like hanging out in the clubs and hearing some good music and getting like a few drinks each night? What was that about? And there was something about some like marketing tech thing stack on there too. But come on, what was going on?
Good question. So all stories in retrospect are cleaner than in reality.
You can clean it up. You can clean it up however you want.
But what I'll say at just a foundational level, I had no interest in being an entrepreneur. I had no interest in like getting into industry.
But it's so funny because there are so many entrepreneurs throughout phases in your life and your family history.
In different ways, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm thinking about the archetype.
Entrepreneurial mindset, right? There wasn't this just like go get a job and just, hang out for a paycheck.
So I'll sidetrack for a sec to say, like, when everybody was selling lemonade.
You're going to ziggy zow me?
It's important. It's important. This is when you, but there's a difference between like, I want to be an entrepreneur and having an entrepreneurial mindset. Right?
Yes, thank you.
That's like a DNA.
Yeah.
And when I was, I think it was about 10 years old, I noticed everybody was on street corners selling lemonade stands or selling lemonade at lemonade stands. And I was just cognizant of the fact, like, I can't sell what everyone else is selling. So I sold like my used stuffed toys and videotapes. And Lord knows what I did with the cash. It almost doesn't matter. Oh my God.
So you were like a vintage shop before vintage shops were a thing.
That's right. An illegal vintage shop on a street corner.
I love it. You were like, I'm so over this toy.
Right. But quite frankly, this is like the opposite experience with Local Vibes. So like this was, first of all, Local Vibes was created because I was basically a failed musician. I played bass and I played drums and I always wanted to be in a band. I had a band. The band was terrible. And if you can't beat them, join them.
There you go.
Right? But really it was recognizing that I was not going to be a great musician, that I wanted to join great musicianship.
Okay, so I'm going to use a word that I just told Victoria I hate, which is pivot. So you pivoted. Okay.
I mean, pivot. I didn't have a job. I was in school, right? Like I was 18 years old. I just moved to Australia and I loved live music. I went out and Melbourne had this insane music scene.
Local Vibes was born, huh?
Local Vibes was born.
I love it.
And the part that bothered me, like so distinctly, was that these artists who were phenomenal, they had like 200, 500 people at their shows already, just couldn't figure out how to break through the ceiling. And I said, what if I found a way to help these bands realize their potential? I've had zero music industry experience. So this is like...
No, but this is what we talk about with entrepreneurs, right? You see a problem and you try and find solutions.
Well, when we talk about rebalance, let's come back to that because I think my mindset has actually changed on what you're investing in and when. But for Local Vibes purposes, we started out as like a blog. We were just looking at bands saying, these guys are awesome, these guys are awesome. And we built followership around that. But like the monetization plan was non-existent. And then we're like, oh, we have to figure out how to make money. So we said, oh, why don't we charge royalties? And we build a roster of bands that are specifically phenomenal at live shows. Why does this matter? Because record labels couldn't sell records anymore. And 360 deals had just become like the thing. So we said, what if we can help de-risk your investments in bands by finding the best live bands, meaning the bands that draw the most people that are up and coming. And so the sad problem with that was royalties for baby bands does not produce a lot of money.
Listen, you just said it, baby bands, baby royalties.
Indeed.
Sure. Okay, so you are a member of New York City's Economic Development Corp's citywide initiative in the VC space called Venture Access Alliance.
Sure.
It's 100+ members, and we are all dedicated and committed to uplifting New York City founders and doing so with a lens of equality and diversity and uplifting unrepresented founders, not at the expense of other founders, but making sure that everyone has a seat at the table. And thank you for being part of the working groups and literally being part of the leadership of this citywide initiative here in New York City. One of the things we talked about was we wanted to make sure that founders knew about us, the VCs. Now, we often ask them to give a 3-minute pitch. I'm going to ask you to do the same. Let's see how he does, listeners and viewers. What is Rebalance? What is it investing in? What's the best ways for people to get to know you guys and get on your radar? And any do's and don'ts as a way to close this out.
Super. Ready? Eddie, let's go.
Okay, and bring into, if you can, maybe I'll give you another minute, so you can bring in this concept around solving for a problem and really what you're investing in.
Okay, sure. So Rebalance Capital, we are a venture capital firm that invests in fintech and workforce tech companies that help propel economic mobility for low and middle income communities. What that means is we are backing the $3.5 trillion opportunity of $90,000 household earners. So not individuals, but households of $90,000 or less.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or the bottom 60% of the income distribution. We invest exclusively in Series A and B companies, which means you'll have somewhere between $2 and $20 million of revenue. And the reason why founders partner with us is for a couple different reasons. One, before Rebalance Capital, I was at Korn Ferry where I covered CHROs. I was an investment banker where I covered CFOs of financial services firms at Citi, indeed.
We love our city.
We love our city. So we have this built-in and systematized distribution network into the intermediaries that already distribute to these end consumers. So we're a B2B2C and B2B marketplace investor. And the second reason why they partner with us is because of sector expertise. I mean, financial services is an incredibly complex, highly nerdy, technical area where we have expertise because we've dedicated our livelihoods to it. My partner Bar and I, and our team Bobby and Rob, and we have venture partners that are also part of the firm that will help our founders, in addition to us, handholding them through virtually any problem that we have the experience to cover.
In some ways, I would say that's more important than a check. I mean, they go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand.
No one's not cashing a check from Rebalance. Let me just be clear.
Indeed. Well, the check's the table stakes, right? Where you differentiate is everything else.
That's right.
And so in addition to the distribution and the portfolio support from kind of our extended team, we also help with very specific inflection points. Corporate finance. So if you're a tech-enabled lender, we can do very nuanced to the industry things like help source asset-backed securities, forward flow agreements, or for everybody, like buy-side M&A opportunities. You can't afford a banker? Here, we'll help. Human capital. Are you building an organization that will scale past the founder centricity? And how do you avoid some of the pitfalls?
Yeah.
And then lastly, is from like an impact perspective, are you sure you're capturing your end consumer's voice and having the intervention that you intended? Are you creating this outcome for this end demographic that you sought to?
Yeah.
So we help with those three pockets. And we find that
powerful.
Each of our portfolio companies uses at least two of the things that we do well.
So you know you're on the right path. What size checks, when should someone reach out to you and how?
Sure. So one, we're big believers that it takes 12 to 18 months to earn trust both ways. It's a two-way street.
Yeah, it's two-way, for sure.
So we generally say, once you've closed your seed, give us a shout. So we can really start to build that relationship together. Our average core check size is $5 million. And again, we're Series A and B, so it ranges up and down, context dependent.
Yeah. I love, and I hope viewers and listeners, you heard that. It takes 12 to 18 months to really get to know each other. Because I think what happens so often is there's just a lot of cold calling that happens. And the hey, we're closing in, 2 months, and, Bob said I should talk to you. And it's like,
Well, unfortunately, you can't get away from that, right? Like there's a gold standard, and
absolutely. But what we coach a lot of the women and diverse teams and founders that we see is start having those conversations even before you're going to raise, right? So, like you said, when you've closed your seed, start having those conversations, right?
For sure.
So we're saying, listen, we may be seed and Series A, but get on our radar when you're pre-seed and even ideation, right?
Exactly.
That's when it really makes sense.
But one thing I want to highlight, just because you mentioned it there, over 70% of our capital goes to underrepresented founders.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I want people to hear that. That's key.
Yeah.
And you don't come at it from a charity, a savior, a rescue.
No way.
At all.
No,
I love that you are about the economics, you're about the returns. You are intentional about the companies and what they're building as opposed to just seeing people and faces and races.
100%. So one, we're a market rate VC. Our limited partner base is commercial in orientation and some are impact in their orientation. But from our perspective, it's not a mandate to invest in diverse founders. The intention is to see who actually has these lived experiences. And because we're focused on this demographic of households with 90,000 or less, it shouldn't be surprising that founders will come from that lived experience.
Yeah. I love when people talk common sense. It's a beautiful thing.
We try.
It's so beautiful. Okay, last two questions in this pitch. You're doing well, by the way, in this reverse pitch. What's the best way to get on your radar? And then any do's or don'ts for entrepreneurs to close us out.
Sure. So one, the folks that should reach out should be B2B2C or B2B marketplaces. If you're in the direct-to-consumer world thinking one day of doing B2B2C, I think that's fabulous. We're just not the right place or time because we're focused on execution risk, which means you already have more than a proof of concept or an MVP. Like you're doing it. You sell to enterprise. Yeah. The best way to find us, if there's no one in kind of our shared trusted network that can get you to us, you can always go through our website. We have an open submission that allows founders to fill in the details. We check it as regularly as we possibly can, and we'll follow up to engage.
Yeah.
And certainly if you're coming through the VAA channel, we definitely want to be supportive. So we do encourage that outreach.
For people to get involved. Yep. And you know what? I think it's okay. Listen, there'll probably be someone in the comments and chat. Did he just say you got to be in the old, the boys club for us to know you? No, he didn't say that. But I love that you said there is this circle of trust. There's this ecosystem. And so we always talk about do the work. You got to do the work, people. And so part of doing the work is knowing the others in your ecosystem, doing the homework on who is the right investor and being in those circles where they are. It's not simply going to be a listserv that gets, shared around.
Yeah. And for whatever it's worth, this is a two-way street too. So we have inbound deal flow, but we also have to create our own deal flow. And that we don't just show up to conferences and think it's going to land in our laps, right?
That's right.
So members of the team will drive outbound outreach where we're doing a thematic market mapping, right? Like on retirement, let's say, for example, we are connected probably to like 1 degree, 2 degrees away from like maybe half of that market map. The rest we don't have the direct connection to. So we also are responsible for getting out there and just doing the work and proving that our value prop is helpful.
Yeah, that's right. And entrepreneurs know entrepreneurs, right? So part of it is just like talking to them too, because they've got a sense of like who's really building something real and who's sort of, all flash.
100%. But that actually brings us to one of the do's and don'ts,
Yeah.
which is if you're going to cold outreach, either someone on our team or through the submission form, really show that you know who we are, right? Like we have a very basic boilerplate. And if you haven't done your homework, then you're not going to get a good reception. And we see that happen often.
Oh my God. We see it so much.
2, I would say, over communicate. In every instance, we have found there to be a direct correlation between the communication patterns during the diligence process and even before the diligence process to the post-investment experience. And what we've learned is we don't want to invest in founders who do not have a handle of communicating effectively with people that are interested in investing in their success. Oftentimes what comes across is you're looking for a check, but you don't want the people behind the check.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you finished us with that. I was at a conference, I want to say B of A. Was it B of A? And they're one of our investors, one of our limited partners in the fund. And one of the panelists said something, I won't be able to quote it, but was saying that they found that the less communication, the less success that they could see in their portfolios.
I buy that.
And you said the exact same thing. Isn't that beautiful? That's beautiful. Josh, thank you for being the human being that you are. Thank you to your mom and dad. I'm so excited. You've got a little one, and I'm so excited for how she's going to grow up and the amazing human being she's going to be and what our future is going to look like with her in it. And thank you for being on VCs Off the Record. Like, we need these conversations, and we need you in this space. So thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for hosting.
This episode of VCs Off the Record is brought to you by Wocstar Ghetto Film School Entrepreneurial Academy. So that was really, really interesting.
I told you he's fascinating.
Yeah, you know what's
and
really...
I love the origin story starts with civil rights activists.
Well, you could see why he does impact investing. His father, his mother, mindful with how they impacted the world.
That's right. That's right.
Really, I didn't expect to hear all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I try to stay very sort of like, I want to be surprised. I want to be intrigued.
That's why I wanted you guys all to meet Josh. He's amazing. And how he got there starts with other people's vision for how they wanted to help communities and repair the world.
An agent of change.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, not to mention Law and Order SVU.
And Peacemakers in Action.
Yeah, right. That, of course, my
Rabbi Herschel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like Martin Luther King.
Yeah. Very. And he is a very mindful person.
What was the biggest takeaway for you, would you say?
2 things. One thing's funny, one thing's not. The funny thing to me was VCs talk with a lot of letters and acronyms. So I was always like writing notes. I was like, B2B, B2C. I was like, B2B, business to business, right? B2C, business to consumer.
Consumer.
Yeah.
You know what? Oh my gosh. With this episode, maybe we should have a little mini glossary, because I think there were a couple acronyms.
You were firing acronyms. I was like,
we'll
speak
put a little
English.
Glossary, everyone. We'll put a little glossary.
I'm smart, not like people think. That's a Godfather 2 reference. But like I felt like a Fredo. I was like, what are they saying?
Fredo.
But also what I really loved was when he talked about the 12 to 18 months shared trust. A trust has to build from 12 to 18 months. When I'm often working to sign original IP, I'm talking with authors, talking with people who have original IP, and I ask for 18 months on a shopping deal. And they say, why not 12? And I'm like, 12 is a really short runway to make sure we go to the next step correctly. That extra 6 months really gives you the time you need to really know what you're selling and to whom you're selling it. And when y'all said, it's the time you need to share and build trust, I was like, that's really what it is. Such an interesting concept.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I think people are going to hear different things in that. I think they're going to hear like, that's crazy, 18 months. My company could be obsolete by then. This technology could be obsolete. Others are like, hey, when there's a hot deal and you just got to get in, there's competitive, process for it. You just got to get in that deal, right? Otherwise, you're going to get crowded out of the cap table. So people are going to hear different things in there. I hope the takeaway, founders and investors, is that you have to be, do the work. You have to be actively involved in your ecosystem so that not everything becomes just a cold call. Like building relationships is really important. This is a people-based business that we're in. Investing is not solely about investing in companies and technology. It's the people that are going to manifest and activate and operationalize these ideas. And so, yes, the deal may be hot, but hopefully we've met at a conference before, or we know someone similar because we're in the same sector or space within the VC or within the same technology, and we're in the same circles. And so the beautiful thing is that there's a lot of ecosystems, regional, local, statewide, national, industry-based, vertical, horizontal, right? And so it's just one more thing to add to your plate, but it's really that relationship building. It's that engaging in the ecosystem, along with the other 110 things you have to do as you're building your company. But I hope that's what people take away from that.
And I thought what else was really interesting was what he started with talking about when he was a kid and he saw everybody selling lemonade and he decided to sell stuffed animals. And I thought, even then, I wrote it down. What did I say?
Hustle.
I said, and I know this is probably an acronym, but I don't know what it is. He like saw what was missing in the market. Like, he didn't solve the problem with the music. He solved a problem, right? He was like, right. But with this, he found a gap in the market.
Yes.
Right. And with
local vibes.
Local vibes, right? I couldn't think of it. Sorry. Local vibes, he filled a need.
Yeah. And oh my God, we didn't even talk about the fact that with local vibes, he also then found another need and was able to monetize this, let's call it a fintech solution that allowed live bands to be able to, with technology, raise money, fundraise for causes they cared about in real time at those bands. And they monetized that, and that became the seed capital for Rebalance Capital. Like, it's a beautiful story that we didn't even get to finish because there's so many things.
I liked how you talked about the difference between being an entrepreneur and having an entrepreneurial mindset. I thought those were the three things that I really like, of the notes. That's what I really was inspired by, because I think anybody can want to be an entrepreneur, but having the entrepreneurial mindset, you could do a lot of things.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
What about you? What did you land on for yourself?
I stayed in the space of how we can be a neighbor to each other. Sort of the beginning of the conversation, I stayed in that space in terms of the takeaways, and it got me thinking, like, how are we showing up for each other? And then that translated to how do we show up for entrepreneurs, because it's more than just the dollar. The investment, the cold hard cash is important, but how do we use the other talents and treasures to support entrepreneurs? And for us at Wocstar Fund, we never make an investment if all we can provide or the only value we have is a check. We may turn away some great deals, but it's really important to us that we have to be in a place where we're adding other value besides just a check. Yeah. And founders are looking for that from us. They're coming not solely for the check, because we're never going to be the biggest check, let's be honest. but they come to us because of the other ways we can add value. So that was starting from where we started the conversation of how do we be a blessing, how do we be a neighbor, how do we bridge communities, to how do we do that, and what does it look like for entrepreneurs is where I landed.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Get back to that busy, fabulous life you have. We'll see you on our next episode of VCs Off the Record. Victoria, thank you as always for being my amazing co-pilot.
As always.
Stay fabulous.
Enjoy. Thanks for hanging with us. This podcast was produced by Wocstar Media in New York City at the Podstream Studios. Be sure to follow VCs Off the Record on Apple and Spotify. We're also on Sheconomy, the State of Women podcast platform. Please consider giving us a good review or share it with someone. Let us know what you want us to talk about on our socials and our YouTube channel. You can find us at wocstar.com for all the information.